Coming up next on Vote 2016. It's Election Day here in Middle Tennessee, which means that we'll have the latest headlines telling you what to expect as you leave the polls.
And speaking of polls, a historic presidential race is currently underway. We'll have the latest polls as presidential candidates Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton go head-to-head in a fight for the Oval.
And Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton aren't the only names on the ballot. Vote 2016 will give you an inside look at the candidates who are campaigning to represent you right here in Tennessee.
All those stories, plus a look at the latest results. Vote 2016 starts right now.
Once every 4 years.
Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm J.R. Smith.
And I'm Katie Inman. Welcome to Vote 2016. We're going to take a look at the key race happening in Tennessee. We'll keep you updated on all the results for each race.
But first, let's take a look at the key races that we will be covering tonight. Tonight, we'll be following election races surrounding the Middle Tennessee area. We will follow races for representatives for the House this election. One race is taking place right here in Rutherford County's own congressional district, District Number 4. Democratic candidate Stephen Reynolds is facing off against Republican incumbent Scott Desjardins. The race is only one that many Murfreesboro residents are watching closely this election. Stay tuned to see which candidate will represent our district for the next 2 years. Another congressional race we're following tonight is District 7 near Brentwood in Williamson County. Incumbent Republican candidate Marsha Blackburn will be facing against Democratic candidate Theron Chandler and Independent candidate Leonard Ladner. Later on in the hour, voter reporter Michael Lynn White will join us live tonight in that district. So stay tuned as we will have the results of this race as the polls begin to close.
We will also be following Tennessee Senate races this election year. We'll take a look at the Senate race for District 14 near Murfreesboro. Republican incumbent Jim Tracy will be facing against Democratic candidate Gail Jordan. We'll see tonight whether Tracy will keep his seat in the Senate office or if Jordan will come to take his place. Another Tennessee Senate race we will be following this evening is District 20 in Nashville. Republican incumbent Stephen Dickerson will be facing against Democratic candidate Eric Coleman this year. We'll have the latest for these races throughout the hour, so stay tuned for continuous poll updates.
Taking a look at the national side of things, we're following Senate races in key battleground states. Republicans currently hold 24 out of 34 seats up for election this year. This means Democrats only need to regain a total of 4 seats in order to take back control of the Senate. We'll be covering the following battleground states tonight: Florida, North Carolina, Nevada, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire. We'll bring you the latest details as the balance of power shifts and which states' Senate and congressional seats are up for grabs as both parties fight for control.
And speaking of the national map, Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump are fighting over just that. 270 is the magic number this evening, one that will decide the very course of this country. It's the number of states' electoral votes required to become the next president of the United States. We'll tell you who's leading in the race for 270 as results begin to come in. But before we get too deep into the national election, let's take a look at how races are going locally. Vote 2016 reporter Jackson Jones is live in District 4 from the Rutherford County Election Commission office. Jackson, what can you tell us about the District 4 congressional race so far?
Yes. Once every 4 years on the second Tuesday in November, yes, it is finally election time here in America once again. We are live out here at the Rutherford County Commission office for the election results going on tonight later. We're going to give you up-to-date results, not just in the presidential election, but what's going on locally as well. Earlier this month, I got to sit down with both parties to talk about what they expect in results and what's going on with their campaigns right now. Let's take a look at that next.
When you're not voting for the president, there's another option on the ballot box you should look for. Voting for our area, District 4. Your candidates, current incumbent Republican Scott DesJarlais and newcomer Democrat Stephen Reynolds.
We decided to get in this race because we thought we could make a difference, and we know that there are at least 100,000 people out there who wanted a choice this November.
DesJarlais has held office since 2011. He won the primary earlier this year and has also won the previous 2012 and 2014 election. In a state that usually swings toward Republican, is it safe to say it's a shoo-in? Reynolds is thinking differently.
It's time to start sending folks to Washington that have had to work for a living, that are what I would consider average citizens. And if we're going to return the House of Representatives back to the people, then we have to start looking at who we're sending up there.
In most elections, attack advertisements are usually very common. This is something both parties have refrained from doing this election.
I've tried to keep this race about the issues. I think that I think the Tennessean voters are tired of hearing about divisiveness and negativity and ugly personal attacks.
Both candidates agree on certain issues, including such topics as job growth, budgeting, and health care. Where they differ is on their backgrounds, DesJarlais being a physician prior to politics, and Reynolds working construction.
I think that if you value an outsider, I earn your vote. If you value someone with a business background with real-world experience, and I think that I should receive your vote.
Who's got your vote when you go to the ballot on Election Day? Jackson Jones, MT10 News, Murfreesboro.
Now, the bell just did strike 7 o'clock just a while ago here in downtown Murfreesboro, and that means polls all across America are closing, and we have yet to learn any news yet on who's leading in the 4th Congressional District for Tennessee. Is it going to be Scott DesJarlais? Is it going to be Stephen Reynolds? We'll keep you up to date what goes on here at the commission office later tonight. We can give you some news from the general election right now. Donald Trump has won states West Virginia, Indiana, and Georgia, and Hillary Clinton has won Vermont. There is a tight race currently in Florida where it is predicted that Donald Trump may come out with the victory, being about 2% ahead of Hillary Clinton. We'll keep you up to date with more going on tonight. Jackson Jones reporting from the Square. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks, Jackson. We'll check back in later as the results begin to come in.
Still ahead on Vote 2016. The polls are closing and the votes are being tallied. We will have updates on the presidential race for you throughout the night.
And find out how early voters have made a huge impact in this year's election. That's coming up next on Vote 2016.
One of the biggest things that both of these candidates are struggling with in this election is if they're going to win the battleground states or not. It's a big deal.
Exactly right. You know, the battleground states, it could really go either way, and they really have to lock those up to make sure that they have a good shot at the presidency. But Dustin Handrahan joins us now with a look at the battleground states.
Thank you, Katie. Right now, the Republicans hold the majority in Congress. Although the presidential races are very important, who holds the majority in Congress could determine whether the president is able to pass policies and legislation. To determine who holds the majority, you have to look at the House and Senate races, and normally the ones that could shift the balance are the ones in the battleground states. In a battleground state, no single candidate has overwhelming support in securing the states. Electoral College, of the 50 states, there are 11 that fall into this category. However, in this election, there are 6 that have the potential to shift the majority. These states are New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Nevada, Florida, and North Carolina. Now, in order to understand how important these states are, you have to break down the House and the Senate first. In the House, there are 435 members. 246 are Republican, and 186 of them are Democrat. In order to win the House, Democrats need 30 seats. However, Democrats are only predicted to win between 5 and 20 seats. If Republicans are able to keep control, they can thank GOP members like House Speaker Paul Ryan, along with about 5 other GOP members, mostly because their districts have the potential to vote Democratic. But they are expected to win re-election. Now, in the Senate, there are 100 members. You've got 54 Republicans, 44 Democrats, and 2 independents. Now, these 2 independents include Vermont's Bernie Sanders and Maine's Angus King, who normally caucus for the Democrats. So, in total, Democrats hold 46 seats. This leaves only 4 seats that the Democrats have to win to gain the majority. Now, in a recent poll that was published in the New York Times, the Democrats have a 52% chance of winning the Senate, and the Republicans only have about a 48% chance. So we'll see what happens after polls close. Now, it will be interesting to see if the majority shifts as the votes come in from these 6 states. Now, for the rest of your election coverage, I'm going to give it back to the desk.
Still ahead on Vote 2016. See how millennial voters are turning out to vote and what role they'll play in this election.
And voter ID laws in Tennessee and across the country are preventing many citizens from voting. We'll tell you why after the break.
Election is the first time many young people around the country have been able to vote. After witnessing a presidential race like no other, what do these first-time voters have to say about their experience?
Janida Hendricks joins us now with more on this ongoing discussion.
Hi, so we have a young panelist group with us. If everyone can go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with you, Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney Golden.
Kendall Ray.
Okay, so is this everyone's first time voting?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so there's been a lot of concern around what millennials think about this certain election, how millennials are feeling, how they're voting. This is an election where we have a woman as a Democratic nominee and a non-traditional politician for the Republican nominee. How do you guys feel about this with it being your first election?
I feel like it's very important for us to vote this year due to the fact that the gravity of outcome that this election weighs. This year, we have about 22 to 23% of millennials voting, which is the highest percentage of millennials to represent the voting class in years ever. So we will be representing the voting class as much as the aging generation. So I think that it's very important that you go out and vote, especially as a millennial this year.
Did anybody else have anything to add to that?
It's just not a great year to start. I think when you have these two candidates to choose from, it's not, it doesn't reinforce that millennials should be voting when you're having to choose between two incredibly potent poisons, I would say. So it's kind of discouraging and disheartening for some first-time voters.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I was very standoffish in this whole election, so it was kind of rough to decide whether I was going to vote. And I heard from a lot of my peers just on how important it was to vote as being a millennial, and since we were representing such a huge part. But I definitely agree with what he said. It was a very challenging year to choose to vote for the very first time.
I'm sorry we ran out of time. This is our millennial panel. Back to you guys at the desk. Thank you all for being here.
With many young people headed to the polls for the first time, some are being turned away. Tony Sloan tells us what's stopping some students from casting their ballots.
Students aren't able to vote if they don't have the proper state identification. And for those who are voting for the first time, some of them think that their voices may not be heard.
I thought that I would not be able to vote simply because I lost it. Because from what somebody told to me and what I understood was that you had to have your voter registration card in order to vote.
And because of that, students from schools all over Tennessee are fighting for the idea of making a university ID valid for voter registration.
I will say there are several other states across the country that do allow students to use a student ID when they go to vote, and that would make things a lot more simple here in Tennessee.
Tennessee is one of 8 states in the United States that require a strict photo ID when registering. Altogether, it's about 16% of the population. And some of those protesting also believe that things are much deeper than what they seem.
And particularly states in the South are disenfranchising voters in ways that are disturbingly similar to the Jim Crow era.
Even if that's just as simple as making a student ID a form of a voter ID, then that arc bends a little bit more towards justice.
Tony Sloan, MT10 News.
Thanks, Tony. Those organizers have since marched to Secretary of State Trey Hargett to get their voices heard. There is no word of a response.
Now let's take a look at all of the state Senate races, including District 14. For Tennessee State Senate District 14, we have Jim Tracy leading with 78% of the vote and Gail Jordan with 22% of the votes.
Well, thank you for joining us for Vote 2016. I'm J.R. Smith.
And I'm Katie Inman. Stay tuned for another look at our continuous election coverage at the top of the hour.
And make sure to stay with us for the final results.